But what I'm going to do tonight is I am going to, oh, just in a Viking, that's nice. You know, you're welcome. Whatever surgery you have, you're welcome on this site. And 90% of what I do applies to any machine, any technique. So what I'm going to do tonight is we are going to talk about the beading foot, which is quite an interesting foot because in all my time, it is the only foot I have never used. So it was about time I checked it out. And of course, it's always interesting when you check it out. So yep, good to see you all coming in still. So that's what we're going to be doing tonight. And it is a common foot. You know, if you, whatever make machine you have, will undoubtedly have a beading foot. And if you have any of the baby locks, all of them have a beading foot. So most people are going to find they have one available to them should they want to use it. So what I thought we'd do is check out what it does. And I have not yet, I just realized I hadn't done it. I have not yet downloaded the notes to my group, but I always put written notes in my group because guess what? You miss bits and then you ask me to repeat them. And what I say to you is they're in the notes, okay? So they are going to be in my notes in my group. And my group is not the same as where I run my lives because this public page does not have a place to put files. So I have to put it in my group, which is Deb Canham Surgery Sanity Projects. And if you go in there, you'll find a menu, and in there you'll find files. And if you click on it, you will find all my written notes for all my Facebook Lives I've done, except for the first few. The first few, I had this illusion that you would take the notes, okay? But that didn't happen. So I now give you the notes that I give myself so that I don't lose where I'm going with things. And sometimes I follow them and sometimes I forget. But I try to because otherwise I go wrong. So I have my notes. I'm going to put them in as soon as I finish this thing. I tried to put them in before. I just forgot. So they're not long notes. So we are working on the beading foot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn around. I'm going to show you the beading foot. And then I'm going to talk about, well, I can tell you now that, you know, whatever foot you use, there's going to be recommendations. And whatever foot you use, there's going to be instructions that they have for you. In the case of the baby locks, it should come with the foot. But if you lose it, of course, that never happens. I have absolutely no idea where my instructions are. You can always go to the website and look under the machine that you have, look under the accessories, and you'll see that it says that there's some menus that come up, and one of them is manuals. If you click on that, it will give you the manual for the feet. So there's somewhere to go. I bought the Triumph Surgery Foot Pick. There are 2 feet that you speak of that are not included that we should purchase. What are the names? Oh, Tracy, that's like a test. I don't know which 2 feet aren't included. I do actually. When you buy the full kit for the Triumph, there are a couple of feet that aren't in there. It's just a quiz. So you can help me answer it. I know that the gathering foot, also called the shearing foot, is not in there. And I'm not too sure what the other foot is. So if anybody else can help with that, that would be great. So that there are a couple of feet that are missing. But this beading foot is in the basic set of 6. So everybody has it if they have a set of feet. Okay, so I'm going to turn you around. I'm going to show it to you, and I'm going to tell you some of the things to be careful about it, because there are a couple of things to be careful of. So here is my beading foot. And what I have here is I have the beading foot for the combo machines. That's the 8-thread machines with the great big wide foot, because it has cover stitch and it has chain. Don't ask me how you attach beads using the cover stitch. I truly, at this point, can tell you I don't think it's possible. Why do they have the holes there? Perhaps decorative. I'm not going to go into that camp, okay? But this is the 8-thread foot, very wide. Now, if you have the Acclaim or any of the 4-thread sergers, you're going to find your foot is much narrower because it doesn't need those cover and chain stitch width. Okay, so here it is, and you will see on this Acclaim foot, the smaller, the 4-thread sergers, it has a needle hole, and that needle is for the O2 needle. Okay, and on this one we are going to be using the O2 needle as well. Okay, so that's the first thing I want to say is I don't think there's any way you can use the O1 needle with this foot. Okay, and the O1 needle is the left needle. It's the needle that makes the stitch wide. So here we go. I'm going to put it on my machine. This is the next thing I want to draw your attention to, because I went along and I bought some beads, and I didn't really think too much when I bought them. And what I did was I bought beads that are way too big to use. Okay, so I want to warn you about it because I don't want you to damage your machine. I didn't damage mine because I worked it out. But see these great big beads here? When I put those in, let me do that just so I can show you. It's going to get in the way of my upper looper, and I don't want to be arguing with my upper looper. I mean, they kind of fit, but I feel that they're too close to my upper looper. Can you see that? Let me move that out. They are very close, and they are going to touch it. Do you see just there? So my advice is make sure you don't fall into the mistake of buying beads that are too big as a safety, you know. Just, I don't want any damage. So here is a much more sensible size, a small beads, and I'm going to put them in. And I did that the long way, didn't I? Right, let me take them out and do that again. I've got a knot in my beads, so just start the other end. Right, so you're going to go under at the back and over at the top, and what you need to do is, like always, you need to have the excess sticking out the back. Okay, and there's two reasons for that. One, it gives you something to pull on, and two, it just helps in case you need to encourage the beads along. So what I'm going to do is I am going to sit my beads for a minute and show you what I did. So the idea behind it is that you can sew beads onto the edge of fabric, and you can see I've done that here. And the stitch that they recommend you use is 3-thread rolled hem. Okay, now the advantage of that stitch is it actually turns up a little hem, so your beads aren't actually sitting on a raw edge, which is a good thing, don't you think? So there you go, it's going to be on the very edge, and I think it's cool. Beads aren't something I've used before, so it was a first for me. So let me just run you through my settings. We're doing a rolled hem, and so I'm using the O2 needle, that's the right needle. I have my stitch width on M. I have my stitch length on rolled 3 or 4. And the point of the length is, if I do it really well, I can actually get 1 stitch each side of the bead, providing my bead's not too long. Okay, so that would be your perfect situation. You know, if you had smaller beads, try and get a stitch each side of the bead. So you would alter your stitch length to make that happen. The next thing I'm going to do is, because I'm using rolled, I'm using the R numbers, the outline numbers that give me the rolled hem. Remember, they move the stitch finger, narrow the stitch finger for me. I'm also going to be using D delta on my automatic stitch selector, for those of you that have automatic stitch selectors. If you don't, then you're going to need to look in your manual that comes with your machine for your tension. Okay, and it will give you a suggestion for a rolled hem tension. The other thing that I want to draw your attention to is they recommend using your stitch, your differential feed between N and 0.6. So, you know, there's there's a consideration, and that kind of makes sense because it's very easy for these things to gather up. So let me just show you what's going to happen. I have my beads have just slid out, as you saw. I have my knife up and cutting for this. So just going to pop my beads in again. That was the only thing I did find. They're very slippery, so they... Okay, they're safely in there. They're the right size. And what I'm going to do is just take a couple of stitches because that will hold them in place so they don't slide out again. And then I'm going to put my fabric in. I've got the right side of the fabric up, and I am going to cut as I go. So I'm going to slide my fabric back as far as I can get it to the knife. And I am just going to go slowly. And I'm going to increase my stitch length a bit, see if that helps. I'm getting more than one stitch in between my beads. And I want to say that one of the things is if I go too long in the stitch length, I might end up with it being more gathered than I want. Okay, it just has the habit of gathering it. So what I'm doing is putting it out at the back. I got caught. So I'm holding onto the beads at the back, and I'm just kind of, I'm not pulling them, but I'm making sure that they don't stop moving. And you'll see that my beads are right next to my knife, but they're quite safe there because they fit. Okay, so now I'm going to cut them and run them out. And be careful because they jumped out then. Did you see that? But, you know, my advice is just go slowly. And it puts them right on the very edge. Now, when I very first started, I had them on stitch length 4. And you see how it kind of gathered them up? So I moved on to a stitch length 3, and that really helped. Okay, so that's something you need to consider. When I very first started, I had it on a 4 because I would have liked to have had one stitch between each thing, but the trouble was it did gather it up. And I had my differential feed on 0.6. That would have been stretching it out. So it would have been kind of stopping the stretch, but clearly not enough on the first. So stitch length 3 was my recommendation for that. I want to show you what else you can do with that. It's not limited just to beads. So in this case, what I did was I used a firm cording, not my regular cording, but this kind of cording. I think is it called? I don't know what it's called. It's trim, and you buy it. And it's quite firm. What I did was I put that trim in exactly where I put my beads, and then I put a piece of fabric underneath, and I just stitched over it. Okay, I just put the fabric in underneath, and I got this cording that was covered, which I quite liked. Now this cording is quite wide, so I actually did increase the stitch width. Okay, but that's a nice finish. You know, I don't know what I'd use it on, but it's certainly a nice finish. The other thing I did, which I don't have a sample, so let me just quickly do it. I got some trim that I made earlier. You can make trim using a rolled hem and decorative threads, and that's what I did with this. And I particularly like it for couching or just, you know, filling in somewhere where you need trim and you can't find the right color. But because it's round, see how it sits in there nicely? If it was a flat piece of ribbon, I would just probably put it in the slots in the regular foot. But see how this, I quite like the way this works because it doesn't flatten it out. Now, I didn't change my thread. I used the green. but if I'd used a pink, see how nicely it attaches trim to the lower edge. I thought that was pretty cool. And I could have used a decorative thread in there. See, it's gone over the pink. There is it on the back. But I could have used a decorative thread in there and it would look very pretty. And I should have said when I did that cording, I did use a decorative thread. I used a 8-weight dazzle, okay, over the cording. So that is that. Do I have any questions? Because what I need to do at this point is reset my machine for Flatlock. Okay, so Richard, if I have any questions, can you?
What's the maximum size of beads or acceptable size of beads?
You know, I don't know. I don't have a measurement for that, for those little beads I had, but just be very careful, okay? Just when you put them in, look and see if your upper looper looks like it could be in danger, because you don't want to be hitting that with beads.
Could cording be used instead of beads?
I used cording, my regular cording, and I found it a bit soft, so it tended to flatten. So the cording I used was much stiffer, much harder than the regular cording that I use generally. Okay, so what I want to do now is I want to sew it on in the center. Okay, so how do we do that? Of course, I've done it just to make sure I can. I'll show you. And there you go. Okay, it's in the middle there. So what I've got to do is I had to change my machine to Flatlock stitch, and I'm using 2-thread Flatlock. And why 2-thread Flatlock? Because it always pulls flatter better. And that's actually what you do. You pull flat and then you have your beads attached in the middle. So I'm using the 02 needle. I'm still using the beading foot, and my stitch width is 3.5, so I'm going to change that. My stitch length is between 2 and 4. I'm going to go for a 3, but it's a regular 3. It doesn't need to be a rolled 3 because I'm using Flatlock stitch. And I'm going to have my stitch selector on B Bravo, which is a narrow stitch, okay? And there's one other thing I have to do, which I nearly forgot. Let me just take you back so I can show you. And that is because I'm doing Flatlock stitch, I've got my needle thread coming down the upper looper channel. I didn't show you the threading, but it's coming down the upper looper channel and going over to my needle. And of course, as I'm only using 2 threads, I've got to use the subsidiary looper. And remember, if you have another machine, it might be called the 2-thread converter. Okay, but it basically just fools the machine into thinking that there is thread in the upper looper. And the first thing you have to do is marry the threads to get a stitch, because you only have 2 threads, and if you don't get them together, then you'll never get a stitch. So here's my folded edge. And at this point, I'm going to put my knife down because I don't want to cut my fold. But, you know, always be careful when you put your knife down, because you don't want to catch your thread around the looper. I have a knot in my beads, so I'm just going to ignore it and carry on. Right, so I'm just going to put my beads in. I think this is the trickiest bit, putting them in where they don't fall out again. I'm going to raise my needle because I can't get them in. Okay, and I'm going to make sure they're sticking out the back so you've got something to hang on to just in case you need to pull them. And I'm just going to take a couple of stitches just so that they can't fall out. Right, they're holding in. So what I need to do now is I need to get that folded fabric under. And the point is, if my knife was up, I'd want this folded edge right against the knife. But that's not possible, or it's not what I'm going to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually feed it just here. I can see the silver plate here. It's just going to go there. But it would be just in front of the knife if the knife was up. And what I'm going to do is stitch. And you can see I'm not going overly fast. And I'm concentrating. Right, so I'm going to cut my beads. Right, so there they are. They're attached on the edge. Okay, but look, if I pull on them, do you see how I can flatten them out on the back? And you can see that typical rung-like stitch on the back. And there you go. So make sure if you're going to use this method that you have really good matching thread, because there's no doubt the stitch is visible. And again, I might, if it's going to be visible, I might use a decorative thread. And an embroidery thread might be a great thread for this one because it's not too heavy. Okay. So that is how to get them in the middle of something. Right.